Welcome to another episode of The Caption Life, a podcast about how comics and pop culture impact life and society, and vice versa. Coming to you from deep in the heart of Texas, my name is Kevin, and join me by way of Zoom call is my GBF, my giant best friend, Sean, in Indiana.
Hello, everyone.
And we are missing one of our troop today. James wasn't able to join us. Before we get started with this episode, please hit that subscribe button on whatever podcast platform you listen to us on, and follow us on social media at Caption Life on both Twitter and Instagram. You can also find out more info and past episodes at podpage.com/thecaptionlife. We are joined this evening by Dr. Sheena Howard. Dr. Howard is an award-winning filmmaker and scholar. In 2014, she became the first Black woman to win an Eisner Award for her book, Black Comics, Politics of Race and Representation. She is also the author of several critically acclaimed books and comic books on a range of topics, including the Encyclopedia of Black Comics. She does all of this in addition to being an associate professor of communication at Rider University. And tonight she is here to discuss with us her new book, Why Wakanda Matters, What Black Panther Reveals About Psychology, Identity, and Communication. Welcome to the show, Dr. Howard.
Thank you. And I'm now a professor, but you didn't know that because I just got the official notice in the mail today.
That's dope.
Oh, that is great.
I'm going to email Amazon because that's where I got most of that information.
Literally, I just got the notice.
Congratulations. Today. We can celebrate today.
I'm celebrating with you guys.
Thank you.
That is awesome. Yeah, I work in higher ed, so I know how great that is.
Rough.
Yeah, definitely rough and everything. Yeah, so it's definitely an accomplishment. That's awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So we want to start off by asking you a little bit about your background in comics, and want to ask you, how did you get interested in comics to begin with, and how did that influence who you are today?
So I got interested in comics actually in graduate school when I was doing my PhD. So I guess around 21, 22, maybe a little later, like 23. So PhD, like 23.
So just like 3 or 4 years ago for you, right?
Yeah, of course. I was reading the Boondocks comic strip by Aaron Magruder, and I was at Howard University doing my dissertation on, I had to pick a topic for my dissertation, and I was young doing my PhD, so I was like, okay, what am I into now? And it just so happened that I was into the Boondocks comic strip. I have a master's in graphic design. And so just studying comics allowed me to kind of put all of the stuff I was doing together, to study like the rhetorical elements of the comic strip, as well as the visual elements of the comic strip. And that was my entry point into the world of comics.
Awesome.
That's great. So your new book, Why Wakanda Matters, is a deep dive into the psychology as well as the social and cultural impact of the film Black Panther. And it seems like a lot of the essays that are in this book were kind of spawned out of conversations and observations from the film. And we just want to get you to kind of explain how the project came together.
Yeah, so I really, after the movie came out, after the Black Panther film came out, obviously it was a big hit. I was really interested in just why the reaction to it, like celebrities buying out movie theaters and just sending kids to movie theaters. Like I thought it was just so different than anything I had ever seen before. I know there was a lot of kind of pent up demand for Black Panther to be, on film in the theaters, but I wanted to get to like kind of the bottom of what this cultural phenomenon that was happening was. And I wanted to have a conversation specifically around the psychology of it. What's the psychological components of the film Black Panther, and why people are reacting the way they were, not both before they even saw the movie and then after, they left the theaters. And I did a research study with young people on, kind of what they were taking away from the movie. And the overwhelming theme was that people were seeing it over and over and over and over again. But then also based on just my research on audience analysis, I knew that, Black people watching the movie were taking something different away than white people were taking from watching the movie. And so I'm interested in the psychology and the communication around all of that, and then how it connects to identity. So that's how this book, the full title is Why Wakanda Matters, What Black Panther Reveals About Psychology, Identity, and Communication. And so that's kind of how it all came together. And, I put I specifically reached out to a few of the contributors saying, hey, I would love for you to be a part of this project. And then I put a call out in some limited outlets for the rest of the contributors. And I kind of picked the essays based on the themes I had created for the book and sent a pitch in to the publisher, and they loved it. And now it's here.
Right. That's awesome. Yeah. And I got to say, I remember when Black Panther came out, I knew, I got to say there's a difference between like knowing the kind of impact it had on the Black community and realizing it. And for me, I realized it just like what you said, when I saw all the reactions of all the, inner city school kids, where you saw all the videos of like everyone getting so excited about watching Black Panther and everything like that. I think for me, it was just like, I was blown away because like seeing that, it just takes a whole different take on that as opposed to like, kind of hearing about it and everything like that as well too. So I know like for me, like it really moved me to see, how excited people were about, seeing a superhero that looked like them. Right. And so I think it was really powerful. So, and actually, I had a question here, but as we were talking about this, I actually realized that there was something that I wanted to kind of share and probably have a discussion here as well too. Is that I think in the first or second chapter, there was a discussion about how Wakanda is kind of seen as an African nation that wasn't invaded by colonialism, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I read that part of the essay, I thought it was really powerful because I started thinking about like how Wakanda is representative with that in mind in terms of, not being affected by outsider or outside colonialism. And I thought what was really cool when I was thinking about that is that, Wakanda is this African nation that has, great advanced technology, but it also has a lot of the, it's kind of like a synthesis with like traditional African tribal like traditions and customs and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was really interesting because I know, the River Tribe in the movie, the leader of the River Tribe had a lip plate in there, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think, reading that part of the essay and thinking about that part, I was like, it's actually really powerful because I think, a lot of people, when they see, people in African tribes and have some of those customs, they see that more as almost like primitive in a sense. But I thought what was really neat in reading about, looking at Wakanda that way is that, that's actually something that is not primitive, but it's like, a way of life that is part of the culture and part of the identity and is very powerful. And I thought like looking at it from that lens was actually a great way to be able to kind of show how, this is not, primitive, tribes or anything like that, but this is a way of life that should still be respected and honored and not kind of seen as a less than type of thing. Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And there's one chapter that actually talks about all of the rituals in Black Panther and what they mean and their significance. And the first part of your comment is important too, because a lot of what, the conversations that I had with people in my community about the movie is like thinking about the past through the lens of the film Black Panther, the what ifs, like what if there was an African nation never touched by colonialism and white supremacy? And what would that mean? What would that mean for the continent? What would that mean for individual places? And so it's just kind of, not only was the movie a form of escapism, but it also was a way to kind of rethink the past and reimagine the future. Because even though the movie is fiction, it still commented on a lot of political, geopolitical, and historical issues that are very real to us.
It does very much come off as a like what might have been like a scenario, like a culture, a state or a country in Africa being allowed to progress with the rest of the world without the entanglements that come with like outside interruption, and of course, regrettably, like what has happened as a result of it. So,
Right. Right.
were you a fan of the Black Panther or like comics or anything, or had you got into that before the film at all?
Yeah, I had started reading more deeply into the history of the comic books leading up to the film coming out. Just because I wanted to get some historical context and and compare, the storyline in the movie to
Mhm.
the story, the different storylines, obviously, in the comic book. And then I did get into Ta-Nehisi Coates', writing of Black Panther. And I worked with Chris Priest, who wrote a legendary series on Black Panther, and so yeah, yeah.
Okay. So like you mentioned the history of the character. The Black Panther for the longest time had a history of being written by white writers for white readers. And that really changed over the last 2 decades with people like Christopher Priest and Reggie Hudlin and Ta-Nehisi Coates. But can you talk about the significance of the film specifically being made by Black artists for a Black audience?
Yeah, one of the things that I like to talk about in my work is kind of the economics of comics and media, because not only do we have a problem with lack of representation in the theaters. When there's lack of representation, that also means that people of color are not getting jobs, so they're not being paid to do the work that they love to do at the same rate that their white counterparts are. So the beautiful thing about the film Black Panther is you see just at a basic level, a lot of Black people were employed, right, to do the thing they love to do, which is act, write, direct, and that kind of thing. So, my work on representation in general is also a comment on the economics behind it. And when certain groups of people are not being hired or not getting work, that's an economic impact. So, yeah, I love the fact that, obviously Ryan Coogler, kind of led the storyline. Obviously he had writers and help and all of that, but all of the actors, all of just even the representation of different shades of Black people, right, in the film, and even the representation of gender presentation, where it's not often that we see a Black female who's bald, right, but that's beautiful in the film, right. And so the more we can see these varied representations of different types of people, the more they become normalized, and it's not like a big deal, right, to have different forms of beauty represented in theaters, right.
I think I think one of the things that I took away from it, because I read another book recently that mentioned the Black Panther, and it's a book on teamwork, but essentially that how filmmaking is very much like a team sport. Like, there's so many different contributors. But one of the things that, like, going away, like when the film was released, what everybody got, accolades, it made so much money and all this stuff. But like when people started being nominated for awards, Ruth Carter won an Oscar for costume design, and Hannah Beachler won an Oscar for production design. And you had the entire like Black Panther community like rally around these people and celebrate them. And especially I feel like especially like leadership like Ryan Coogler, who was kind of at the head of it. But I think that reflects I really think it reflects the way that women were portrayed in the film. Like they're like an equal part of the equation.
Right.
And like in reading the book again, I was reminded that the Dora Milaje means the adored ones, and that it's a really big important thing that that women were not only just treated this way in the film, but they also gained recognition for the work they did on the film.
Right. Right. And there's a couple of chapters in the book Why Wakanda Matters that talks about this solidarity between women in the film, and what that meant, and how it felt to people. And also, yes, I do want to give a shout out to Philip Boutte Jr., who wrote the foreword for the book, who's actually the costume concept artist for the film Black Panther. So if you get the book Why Wakanda Matters, make sure you read that foreword. It's a pretty awesome forward by an awesome guy who's directly related to the film Black Panther.
Yeah. I gotta say that was a great forward. Like just reading that,
Mhm.
I was moved because it was just being able to see it from his perspective and his own journey and everything like that. Like it was just very moving. I really loved reading that. So it's probably one of the best forewords I've ever read in my life.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll make sure that he gets that message.
Yeah, definitely. It was, oh my gosh, it was so moving. I loved it.
So I'm going to tell you my favorite book because I'm a teacher. My favorite chapter of the book, because I'm a teacher, is chapter 12, and it's about identity, and it's also about teaching through the film. I have a very interesting background because I'm a white person from Texas, mostly Christian upbringing. I was raised in a Hispanic family. My dad is from Mexico, and then I grew up in an area where we had a black rodeo arena, like in my town. Like a lot of my friends who were African American were also like they rode horses and stuff like that. So I think a person's experience creates an outlook for them, and I really liked this chapter because I think it's important that that you can separate between identifying as and identifying with. Like you don't need to be a black person to understand or to be able to recognize someone you in the story. And I think that in the book it's covered. Evan Jones covers this in the book, and he talks about Everett Ross as a character and how that Wakanda is revealed to Everett Ross the same way that is revealed to the audience, where it kind of outsiders and we kind of like grow into the story. And I don't think that's a coincidence. I think my question is, okay, so I'm going to get to the point now. Do you think that there's a role that stories like this have for exposing like the uninitiated to African culture, or to the black experience, or black excellence? And do you see that playing like a larger role, mass appeal media playing a larger role in like combating hate?
Yeah, I'm curious as to what white people take away from the movie, right? Because I know my conversations with Black people are around identity, are around the difference in representation between Black Americans in the film and Africans, right? There's a distinction in there. And that's why I really appreciate this book too, because it's not all praise for the film. There's some critique and real criticism of the film and the representation, particularly of Black Americans in the film. And so to your question, I'm curious as to what white people take away
from my circle. I can tell you by and large, for the most part in my circle, a lot of people loved it. The people that I knew that didn't love it are people that I know live in areas of our country untouched by where there's not a high concentration of Black people. So they don't see that every day. I mean, I taught at Booker T. Washington Junior High School for 13 years. So like I see like these are things that matter to me because these are my children. These are the kids that I see every day. But I mean, I got the across my like circle of friends Facebook feed. I got the whole gamut because I have a friend who is from Nigeria who loved the film and would post a lot of things about the film. Saw it probably 10 times. A lot of times his opinion was that Killmonger was right, and but that's coming from his experience. The people that I know that didn't like the film, I think, honest to goodness, they were probably threatened by what Killmonger is saying.
Exactly.
It's a little too real for them to for a Black person to like make those kind of threats.
Right. Right. And in the research study that I was telling you that I did with some young people on it's like the uses and gratifications of the film Black Panther. Basically, why do you keep going back to see the movie and what does it mean to you? And there was a lot of discussion around Killmonger, right? And most people said, most of African Americans in the study said, I completely agreed with Killmonger. He's right to be angry. He's right to be upset. He's right to want to free Black people from oppression. But of course, they don't agree with his methods, right? Because his methods are basically toxic masculinity. But then it always goes back to the question, how far is a peaceful protest going to go? So, and those were the types of questions. Those are the types of conversations I wanted to have as a result of the book, these deeper conversations, particularly with the African American community, and then connecting that to mental health. Okay, so what can we learn about mental health from the film? And I think the book does a really good job of covering that. What can we learn about mental health and psychology through the film? Because there's an array of just mental health practitioners who wrote chapters in the book and who are breaking it down. Like, this is racial identity development. This is what it looks like through Killmonger. This is what racial identity looks like through T'Challa. This is how they can end up at these places based on their life experiences. And I wanted the book to speak in a tone that everybody could understand the chapters and it wasn't too academic, but they all also were getting a dose of some real mental health conversations and models and ways to heal. One of my favorite chapters is the chapter Vibranium Healing, which talks about like self-care. What can you do as a result of racial trauma? The racial trauma that you are absolutely going to experience as a person of color in this country that is just unavoidable. Here are some things that you can do. That's one of my favorite chapters. So she doesn't just say, hey, you're going to experience racial trauma and deal with it. It says, yeah, you're going to experience racial trauma. Some of it may look like what Killmonger experienced, but here are some positive ways that you can heal yourself.
I think it's interesting to remember too that Killmonger's response to, or his plan for action is a very American thing. You know what I mean? It's very American to escalate conflict to violence, and that's kind of what made him different from being Wakandan. And I don't know. I think more people can look at it and see themselves in that, regardless of their race. That he's not just a black character. He's still an American character, and he has a very American response to like I'm just be honest, like let's blow shit up because because we're unhappy with the way things are going. So
right.
Yeah. I so in talking about Black Panther and T'Challa, so obviously last year we lost Chadwick Boseman.
Yeah.
And we wanted to just kind of ask you a little bit about it's hard to separate Chadwick from the role because he just did a fantastic job as an actor. But then I know when he passed away, that was the first time I found out that he had cancer and like all the things that he was doing. So like he was just generally like a great person, so he embodied that spirit of T'Challa, and so I think we want to ask you what do you think about his legacy that's going to continue to grow, and how is the movie going to be able to have that same sort of impact without having Chadwick in that role now?
Yeah, and so this book was got really tough to complete because everything was happening when I was putting this book together in 2020. Chadwick passed away right as I was like, we were finishing up the book, so I had to go back and kind of rewrite the introduction. We had to go back through all the chapters and just make sure that we were being sensitive to his passing, and and then George Floyd happened, and just a bunch of stuff. So when the publisher said, "Oh, I think you should go back and kind of rewrite the introduction because you want to address these things," I was like, I don't think I can do it. Like, it was just so mentally draining. COVID-19, how can I forget about that? And it was just so mentally draining. But we did go back and, added a memory page, Chadwick Boseman, and I made my comments on just everything that was happening as I was putting the book together. And just to have him pass away, but also to have him be like Black Panther, and he's what everybody's going to associate with Black Panther, was kind of like, man, it was kind of like a nail in the coffin type situation where it's like, and you had to take our Black Panther, like, that kind of thing. It's definitely really sad, definitely really shocking, of course, to the public, because we didn't know he was even sick, right? It's like you're doing all these things and making all these box office hits while you're dealing with a terminal illness. If you look at his story, I think that is kind of inspirational. it kind of makes you feel like nobody has an excuse, right? Like
No,
if
right.
you want to do something, do it, right? And I think it just, his legacy just kind of lives on in all of his work, particularly Black Panther. And I think they're trying to figure out what they're going to do with Black Panther 2, the movie. I think they had put something out before where it's like, we're not replacing him kind of thing. Like, we're not replacing him.
Right.
So, what is that going to look like? Who is it going to be? Who's going to take on the mantle? It's a lot of different ways you can go with it. But you also have to make sure that the public's going to be receptive to it and want to, go to the theater to see what they do with the next version of the film. That's going to be, I guess, the tricky part.
Right. Yeah. I gotta say it's I know it's very disheartening for me because I know that, like I said, Black Panther meant so much to so many people. And like, even me and my son, I we went on vacation a couple of weeks ago. We were at the beach and it was just really funny. Like, he was trying to tackle on the waves, and like right before the wave would crash, he would like do the arms cross and say Wakanda forever,
Yeah.
And I gotta say, like, it was just great to see that because, I think that just kind of symbolizes how now, I don't want to say now necessarily, but like we're now getting to a place where superheroes can, everyone can identify with a superhero on some level, right? And I think with Chadwick Boseman, passing away, I think it was just, and how much, the movie and how much he meant to people, it's just going to be very difficult to see like how this moves forward. And I hope that, it continues to have the impact it does. And I think it's definitely difficult to do that when the person who embodies the character, has passed away. But I'm hoping that, they do a good job with that.
Right.
But I mean, with that being said, I know we also want to ask you if you know of any other, with your background, if there's any other superheroes of color that you think is ready for film adaptation that you would like to see happen that, that would possibly have the same kind of impact as Black Panther or on some different level. But is there any superheroes of color that you think would be great and ready for a film adaptation now?
So I know who I'd like to see get a film adaptation, and that would be Nubia from Wonder Woman, who actually they're trying to like do some things with Nubia now. You see like she has the graphic novel either is out or coming out over at DC, and she's a character that didn't get a lot of play historically. She pops up here and there. She has obviously a couple different storylines because that's just how the comics work, but she's Wonder Woman's sister. She's Diana's sister. And I think just now would be a great time to see her get more play and to see her get her own movie, because I think there's a lot of great things you can do with her character, particularly in this time period that we're in. I feel like with these things, timing is everything, and you can, but it's kind of like being opportunistic. When is a great time to bring certain characters back where I guess the industry and the cultural gatekeepers can see the value in it, unfortunately. I think now would be a great time to see a Black female superhero get her own film, and I think that Nubia would be great for it.
Well,
We already had the Wonder Woman movie.
You think about
and that did well.
You think about things like when tragedy strikes sometime, and there's something related to that in a film that's about to be released, and they scratch the film. I remember. In the year 2001, when September 11th happened, right before September 11th happened, there was a Spider-Man trailer with that featured him chasing down a group of criminals flying through the city, and he spun a web between the Twin Towers and caught the helicopter in the web, and then they couldn't use it. But like with where we are as a society, where we are beginning to, it's still a fight with a lot of people to embrace different cultures and different ways of life. But where we are going, we got to keep the snowball building, keep the momentum rolling, and find ways to introduce these characters. I think Marvel specifically does a really good job of this. My son was commenting last night about how they swapped the gender of the Flag Smasher in the Falcon and Winter Soldier. And I'm crossing my fingers that Falcon gets to be Captain America, because it's you know, and that's a main theme of the show is America ready for that? And they, even in the show, they touched on a conversation, and it was a big part of, I guess, the second episode, about where, like, hey, aren't you Black Falcon? And he's like, no, I'm just Falcon. But like those conversations, I had that conversation with my son when Captain America came out, and a few years ago, he was like 4 or 5 at the time. He's 12 now, and
wow, goes fast.
Yeah, but when the comic came out, I was super excited because I've always loved the character of Sam Wilson, and I was like, oh, this is going to be great. And in media at the time, he was Black Captain America. He was Black Captain America, right. And we had a discussion, like, we just call him Captain America. We just call him Captain America in this house. And I think that's something that is important to do, but I feel like those are the conversations we need to have. And we need to keep the snowball building. We need to keep the momentum. And like, my son's like, man, I really hope, there's a character on Captain America who will eventually become the Falcon, and he's a Hispanic character. And my son's like, man, I really hope that they let him be the Falcon too, because like, we gotta like keep it going.
Yeah, I agree. You gotta, let's keep the pressure on, right? Because we can easily backtrack. We see it all the time. So keep the pressure on, keep these stories coming out, keep telling new stories with new diverse characters. That's why I'm like, the next thing I want to see is a Black female superhero with her own movie. Right. And I don't want that to feel like that's radical.
Right.
That's
right.
You have to normalize this stuff, and the only way to do that is to just do it.
Right.
And so I hopefully this snowball in media continues to go in that direction.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, and I gotta say, I think, you're both on spot on in terms of trying to keep that momentum going, because I mean, there is going to be, pushback on anything that does that, right? Like, especially, I remember reading just a few weeks ago how they're talking about DC looking into having a Black Superman, and how people
I saw that.
Right.
That's not going to go well for the public.
Oh my gosh. Well, what's interesting is, one, they were suggesting Michael B. Jordan, which I'm like, I think he would do a fantastic job as Superman. But like, when I see these arguments saying like, Superman has always been white, I'm just like, well, let's back up and let's talk about how the fact that Superman is an alien to begin with, like an extraterrestrial alien. Right. So
you can make him purple if you want to, like.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Yeah. And so, but I mean, I think that's just, how is this going to be? For the longest time, I think it's, part of it is just the history of institutional racism that we've just had. And like, it's just going to be a long journey just to kind of, break those chains, unfortunately.
It's the myths that we tell ourselves, and the myths that the people in charge tell us,
right.
A Black superhero is not going to sell. A female superhero is not going to sell. It might sell domestically, but it's not going to sell internationally. Like, all of those myths have been perpetuated by the people in charge, and they've been squashed and shattered. And so now we know it's not true. And now you can't sell that myth anymore. Right. So,
Yeah, I know. It's frustrating.
It's what's ingrained in people to expect. Like, you can't mess with Superman, right? Like you said, Sean, like, Superman's white. People will get over it. They said the same thing. They said the same thing about the president a few years ago, and look how that turned out.
Right.
So they'll get over it.
Yep.
My son, in all of his nuance, though, made a point yesterday about when we were talking about the gender swapping of this character. He said, like, I don't mind that, but I think also, like, there are a lot of great characters out there that need to be explored too. So like, I'll play devil's advocate and be like, there's so many, but as much as I want to see Michael B. Jordan in the super suit, like, there are other great characters, other Black comic book characters that we can dive into,
who are already Black.
Exactly.
Right.
You can get written or drawn as much into the storylines. That there's so many.
Right. Definitely.
All right, Dr. Howard, before we let you go, because we've really enjoyed this conversation, but we know that there's a toddler running around your house that's going to need your attention soon. Before we let you go, can you please let our listeners know where they can find you and your work on the web?
Yes, my favorite channel is Twitter. So I'm at Dr. Sheena Howard on Twitter. That's Dr. Sheena Howard on Twitter. Find me over there. And then all of my other socials are pretty much the same. I am on Instagram, Facebook. I have a Facebook fan page, Dr. Sheena Howard. My website is sheenachoward.com. And yeah.
All right. Thank you so much. And this has been great.
Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of The Caption Life. We hope you enjoyed listening. We thank Dr. Howard for joining us. Don't forget to smash that subscribe button on whatever major podcast platform you listen to. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Caption Life. And if you like what we're doing, give us a shout out and tag us in your post. For more info about us and all of our previous episodes, please visit podpage.com/thecaptionlife. Until next time,
Wakanda forever.